Welcome, everyone, to episode 70 of Everything Teams Phone Live. It's a huge group today. We've got two amazing, super excited to bring on these guests, one of which has not been with us before, her very, very first time. And it's not Bailey. So, Mary Beth, Daryl, thank you very much for joining. We appreciate you being here and working through episode 70 with us. We're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about some amazing Microsoft stuff. But for now, I got to ask Bailey to do, actually, Bailey tells me, hey, I've got to do some stuff. She's got to do some housekeeping for our number 70 show, as she is our producer and boss. Go for it, Bailey.
Thanks, Rick. Welcome to the show, everybody, and welcome to episode 70. I can't believe it. As you guys know, this podcast is sponsored by Momentum, where we help businesses connect, collaborate, and engage using Microsoft Teams. Now back to our host.
Awesome. All right.
I'm just going to say this. I'm excited for today. Episode 70, that's a big number. We've been doing this, going on close to 2 years now. Also, Daryl, Mary Beth, welcome. We were sitting at a dinner in, I think it was April, here in Denver. I live in Denver, so sitting where I'm at, having dinner, talking about we got to get you guys on the show. And Mary Beth, I can't remember if I was sitting across from you at the table for that night.
Shoulders. We're
shoulders. Right.
Yeah.
Right next to me. And we're like, we got to get you on the show. And it has taken us till
hot minute.
September
no one's
to get
counting.
you on. But
it's not like you guys are busy or anything, right? Come on. That's awesome. Well, welcome to the show, Daryl Hunter, Mary Beth Kirk, both from Microsoft, both from the same team, actually, at Microsoft. And if you're delivering services, Teams Phone, to large organizations, there's a very high likelihood you are engaging with Mary Beth and Daryl and Miguel and a special crew of people that just kind of know their stuff. So we're very excited to have both of you on today's episode 70. Brandon, what do we have lined up for today, buddy?
Well, I was joking on our last episode where I'm like, we should put Daryl and Mary Beth. We should do a quiz off, but I didn't bring any quiz off questions, so I'm not prepared with any kind of flashcard quizzing. So you guys, I guess, escaped maybe my evil plan.
Daryl's a trivia guy. I would have gotten smoked. Like, I'm not prepared for that.
Hey, bump! He would have hit the buzzer. Bump! I love it. Is there a Teams buzzer around someone? There's a Teams buzzer.
Maybe. It's probably somewhere. Easy button.
That's right.
Something.
Here we go.
There you go. Well, we've got an outline today, guys, and this is exciting because sometimes we prepare pretty well for a show, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's a little loose, a little ebb and flow. Since we have a producer now, though, she does an amazing job, Bailey, of putting together agendas that we kind of go, hey, this is appropriate. This is good. Let's talk about this. What's the expertise of our guests coming on, and how much can we even ask good questions in this topic? So we go through these things. And so today, because we don't often talk about devices, and we've got a device expert on the show today. It's going to be exciting to it's going to be exciting to chat about some device development, because there's a lot of cool things happening from a device perspective and managing devices and how they're being rolled out. I'm particularly tickled with frontline devices right now. I think that's pretty interesting in the retail space, right? But Daryl, you are going to be our device sort of expert today, and we're going to ask you questions, and the questions may not even be good, so you'll have to kick us back and go, hey, that really doesn't apply here. You got that wrong. And from a context perspective,
I already have the number one, maybe the number 1 and 2 questions that we get asked from customers all the time on devices. So I'm dive in. Let's do it. Episode 70. Here we go. We're going. Daryl, you ready? I feel like we need some suspenseful music going now.
I can do that. So
yeah, no. Okay, so from a device perspective, some of the common questions we get: how do I deploy hundreds of devices into my organization remotely without requiring the user to sign into the phone. Do you have a good solution for that?
That's a toughie. That's a toughie. So I want to define some terms. So the world that I live in, Mary Beth and I are on the same team. We live in customer success, which is more around like the products that you already own. How do we help you accelerate your journey to get maximum value out of whatever you already purchased? Devices is one of my areas of expertise. So if we're talking about Teams native devices like Teams Room on Android or panels or displays or Teams phones that might sit and look like a plastic phone here, which is really great to go slam and feel good about things, right? If we're talking about those, we don't offer a fully zero-touch device deployment method for native phones. What we do offer are remote login capabilities that we can use like device code flow. You guys are probably familiar with it, even if you don't know it by that name, right? At home, you may have a Roku or an Apple TV, and you want to grab the latest ESPN app, and a code shows up on your screen. You clicky, put the code, now you have ESPN, right? Our devices are similar. All of our devices run a device code flow that allows you to pair remotely. So users can do that from their desk by walking up and clicking some buttons on the phone, but administrators can do the same thing and log in remotely. But to your point, if there's hundreds of them, that gets kind of unwieldy, right? So administrators can do that from a Teams admin center. The good news is administrators also can do some level of provisioning inside Teams admin center where they may have 20 or 30 devices that are going to go to, like, I live in Louisville, Kentucky, right? So maybe some of those devices are coming to the Louisville office. I do some pre-provisioning. I get some 6-digit codes. I ship the phones to Louisville. And then my really smart person that sits at Louisville knows how to take them out of the box, walk up to it, click a button, and type in that code. So there's a way to provide this type of pre-provisioning and post-provisioning of Teams devices, but none of that's 100% without touch, right? That zero touch is what I know that we're keeping track of. We're very interested in. That said, there's another type of Teams device, and we're going to call that more of a legacy or 3-pip third-party interoperability device. Those might, for those of you who've been around the world a little bit like myself and Mary Beth, those might be like Skype phones. Instead of having that native Teams interface, it would be an OEM specific interface from like Yealink or Audio Codes or Poly or whoever you might be using. SIP Gateway is a method by which those old phones have life, and those older phones can register into Teams. And SIP Gateway does have a bulk remote provisioning tool through an elevation in PowerShell and some flippy floppy things that you can do in a script. We have a whole playbook on that, as a matter of fact. I know you weren't like kicking that down the can, but there is many playbooks that we've built, and one of them around SIP Gateway devices offers how to do that. It's a long answer. There's even another type of device, but this one's kind of where I've kind of hit my lid, and that might be like a shared device around like frontline worker. But those are a little bit more complicated with some mobile device management tools, but we're making progress.
Okay.
So what
do you get that, Brandon? Like, I don't get that. Like, I get the how do I not touch my phone? Because like the logging in to me seems like that's pretty like, hey, go put your user, that's your phone. Or is it around shared devices that you're typically seeing, like common area phones?
It's both. I'm going to say this as nicely as possible, but first, really quick, I love your uber technical term, Daryl, flippy floppy stuff. Super technical. No, we get that a lot in initial customer rollouts where we're deploying and shipping new, usually Teams native phones more so than the SIP Gateway. I feel like organizations are a little more forgiving on the SIP Gateway side because they understand like, this is legacy tech. We don't expect it to be as tightly integrated. So there's a level of forgiveness there. On the native devices, it's more, how do I say this nicely? Organizations, the IT side goes, I want to be able to roll this out to these groups that are not as technically savvy and not have to support a bunch of IT tickets to get on calls with them or, call their cell phone or whatever and say, okay, click this, click this, click this. It's more about reducing the level of effort from an administrative perspective. But what I'm hearing is there's a pretty good solution out there. It's not necessarily zero touch, like you said, Daryl, but there are ways that the administrator can kind of help shepherd that process.
Yeah, for sure. And to add a little bit more to it, I think it's really important. The team that Mary Beth and I sit on, and Miguel, I think, was with you last week. There's an internal Microsoft process where we can capture this voice of the customer, this technical feedback, and do something with it. There's a whole team that supports through engineering and through us in customer success and in our sales technical unit and others. This has been coming up for as old as time, 84 years, I think. This has been coming up a very long time. Here, I've been around phone systems for most of my career. That's 25 plus years. So the concept that many traditional old school phone people like me, and I'm going to point at Mary Beth as well, right? The concept of taking this plastic phone and having a tool by which I can do zero touch provisioning, not quite a butt set, but close to a butt set, right? Many of our manufacturers will do that based upon MAC address, right? They can do some sort of pre-provisioning with MAC address, and then the device boots up. It points itself via DHCP to like a provisioning server of some sort, and it pulls a config, and it's magic. The reason we don't do that at Microsoft today, at least, is that everything's hinged on the identity. So instead of about the device and the MAC address and the hardware burned into that, there's an identity. Me, Daryl Hunter, you, Brandon Bradley, common area phone 5, room 6, right? There's the identity context of our devices is one of those areas, which is why we've tried to put as much as we can in playbooks, and we do a lot of sessions like this for education. I do know that we're keeping track of like, what does that look like? How can we move from an identity context to more of a device context? And they're thinking through what that might look like. And I think there'd be value there, but I think it'd be awesome to, as we make progress, but we have really good tools from now and then, but still little gaps here and there.
Yeah. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm going to say this lightheartedly. The approach we take when a customer might push back and be like, man, we really want that zero touch. We just play the card of, this is in your best interest around security, right? It's no longer just this open device that someone can plug in and instantly gain access to dial tone and start abusing service. It's tied back to what you said. It's tied to the identity, and there needs to be some kind of authentication process that brokers to validate that, yes, you can now in fact use this phone. That could be completely smoke and mirrors, but that's kind of the approach we take.
I like it.
This is completely kind of off topic, but I had a customer. I think this is pretty interesting. It has nothing to do with anything we're just talking about, but I just thought about it now. And I haven't taken my ADHD pill today, so it's that you can expect a couple of these things. There was a law firm that was from a device perspective. They didn't want to roll devices out because you couldn't lock the device. So people were signed into the device, but you couldn't lock the device, and they were concerned about voicemails being available to someone who walked in the office, right, and just hitting the voicemail button or something like that, right? That's been solved now, right? I think I saw something that was solved a bit ago. Is that so? Now there's codes on there that you can just kind of old school do your voice.
And we've had lock codes for a while. We did not have the ability to enforce a lock code. That's relatively new through configuration profiles and Teams Admin Center. We can now enforce lock codes, but the concept of pin lock codes have been around for a while. So from your perspective, it's not just like, oh, maybe they might want to click a button, listen to my voicemail, but most of our rich native devices also have calendars. And so there might be like a really private, important meeting that if I walk away and go grab another Coke in the fridge, someone walks up and look at my calendar on my phone, right? My computer's locked, my calendar might be open. So we do honor like the privacy settings and appointments, but not everybody uses those. So this need to be able to lock down the device is important. And so I think we've solved most of those use cases, if not all. And I know that's come out through technical feedback that Mary Beth and I've been talking about for years.
There you go. I'm set now. That was it. That was my hardware question. I'm good. All right.
That just made me think of an idea. Like Microsoft owns the phone, not the hardware itself, but the software, running that phone. And most businesses are running Microsoft services tied into their computers. Could be Windows, could be Mac, but it's tied to Active Directory. Wonder if there could be a day where the two are paired together. So when I lock my computer, I do the old Window L key. I wonder if that could just send it right over to the phone. Anyway, that's way off topic. That's just
it's almost as if that exists already.
I thought you were going to go in the direction of they own the desktop. They own this sort of system of the physical phone, and then I was like, the last sort of remaining screen that could be owned in the business essentially is a mobile device.
We should start making mobile phones.
We should make video phones.
Yeah, we should make a mobile phone.
What a novel idea, right? What a novel idea.
We should try that. Yeah.
I think what Rick's referring to is TPM. if I'm not mistaken.
No, I was referring to like Nokia. Like I was
Phone.
like, oh, like it was the
He wants a
Windows phone.
Because TPM
But
essentially becomes that without needing to own the hardware, just like the phone hardware is not owned by Microsoft, but it's the application is.
I am newly fascinated with the Teams Phone Mobile, right? So new fascination about that right now. So I think it's no traction here in North America, actually, quite frankly, anywhere at this point in time. And I think it's because it's like Operator Connect. Okay. So when Microsoft introduced Operator Connect to carriers like us, operators were like, yeah, let's go get in the Microsoft ecosystem now. Yay. We're in there now. And we're like, where's the business? Like, no one's coming to us. Why aren't they just like rolling into us? And I think it's because carriers don't understand, nor do they still, to be honest, that the connectivity, whether it be Operator Connect or direct routing, is quite frankly, it's not irrelevant, but it's not as important as what you're trying to get to. What you're trying to get to is Teams Phone. Like you're trying to get to Teams Phone. You're trying to move your organization to Teams Phone. Because you've got several ways to do it, I think it complicated a lot of things for these carriers. Like, I don't know what the difference is between this and that. And so they're not really selling Teams Phone. And I think that's the struggle there, is they're not selling Teams Phone. They're really just, here's my Operator Connect services. And it's more than that. I tell our story all the time where we, for 8 months or a year, we were like waiting for it to shower revenue, and it just never happened until we understood the benefits of Teams Phone and we could convey those benefits to our customers. So now we're like, now we're full on sort of Teams Phone ninjas, and we love this stuff. We're like, this is amazing, right? And that's why I think people struggle to understand it. And obviously Microsoft makes it quite confusing because you've got a lot of different ways to connect your Teams Phone services, right? Teams Phone Mobile, direct routing, this kind of direct routing, that kind of direct routing, Operator Connect. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So anyway, Brandon, what's up next?
Yeah, back to devices.
Sorry, back to the show.
Sorry,
devices show, apparently.
Man, I'll tell you what.
I'll take a hard right in a few minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so second question on devices, right? So I'm still working on deploying these devices. I've been educated on, here's maybe the best practice, or here's the playbook on how you do your near zero touch provisioning. I'll call it that. Next, what are some big gotchas for organizations to watch out for as they're rolling out in regards to like device administration? And that could be things like Intune and what are the things that are common misses or gotchas for organizations that they should really be aware of around device administration?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And I think it's still related to the story of moving from a traditional, I hate to use the word legacy, but a traditional PBX, right? And how it's managed in MAC addresses, and it's very hardware centric. Teams Phone is not, it's software centric, right? We have amazing OEM partners that put together awesome hardware, but it's ultimately the software is different, and it's all hinged around identity. And if it's hinged around identity, then Microsoft has a point of view of how to properly secure that identity, right? So one way we might do that is Intune, to enroll a device and then to offer some level of compliance to ensure that we're as secure or standard, whatever terminology you want to use, as possible, right? We're meeting your standards. Hopefully those standards are focused on security, but hey, we're meeting your standards, and then now you're enrolled and compliant. But then it's also, because there's identity involved, we have Azure Active Directory, Entra Services, Entra Directory, Entra Identity. I'll never get the word right. Hold me accountable to that, please. Where we can do things like conditional access, right? Daryl Hunter can log into an Audio Codes phone or a Poly phone from this corporate office or my house. If Daryl Hunter tries to log into a phone from an unknown network, block that, because somebody may have exfiltrated his identity, right? So I think, to your point though, is PBX admins are not 100% directly transferable to Teams Phone admins. Mm-hmm. There's new skilling that's required when you're looking into Teams Phone. So being able to either learn new skills or make sure you have the right people at the seat of the table to think through Teams Phone is new when it comes to Teams Phone. It's not been new with things like Skype for Business and Link, because there's always been extra things required, like database administration and Active Directory administration, right? And some network folks for things like media quality. I'm going to tee up Mary Beth in a second, because this is really valuable and it's very adjacent. So if I put together a playbook and I'm going to tell a customer, how do you take these awesome devices out of a box, unwrap it, plug it in the network, and then flippy floppy, the device is booted up and working, right? It's not just that. There's probably some pre-provisioning taking place inside Teams. You're probably going to Intune and building enrollment profiles. All of our Teams native devices run Android. But today they're running Android with a device administrator agent. Device administrator is different than enterprise administrator. So customers that might say, oh, I have a whole bunch of Android phones or Android tablets. It's just not an Android device. I'm just going to let it come in the network. It's going to fail immediately because they're different flavors of Android, right? So I think your question is a good one of, it's not just Teams phone system. It's not just a device out of the box. It's the Microsoft-centric point of view of identity and licensing and all of the different admin portals that, again, they're in the playbook. I can talk about that at depth. But if you're going to get that device properly provisioned, you want to make sure it's a good quality call, right? So that's the question you didn't ask, but that's the question that comes next every single time. It's out of the box. It's logged in. I've made a call. How do I trust Microsoft to make sure my call quality is awesome? Because I know what that looks like from PBX vendor ABC. I'm still learning about this Microsoft phone stuff. We probably have a point of view on what good call quality looks like from that great device that you just got running on your network, right? So I think that'd be valuable to small transition, and we can go back and forth a little bit, but
yeah, no, I think that's a great segue to talking about that. I think to maybe tee it off, one of the things I think comes up the most in my conversations with customers around quality and that trust of, how do I trust Microsoft? How do I know that every time I pick up that phone, it's going to be a good quality call? And one of the things that our customer base or our potential customers tend to bring up is, I've read the news. I see Microsoft has had some huge outages. So how can I even know that my phone system is going to be reliable to even have a quality call? So maybe we start there with SLAs and whatnot and work our way into like the quality. And then how do I analyze to ensure that that quality is being maintained?
So I want to real quick. Do we have the link for the playbook? Because I think it'd be really, really cool, Bailey, if we could drop the link in our chat or in the comments below, so that people have access to this playbook. Because I think that's really cool. These are great resources to kind of have available to everyone that's listening as we walk through some of the components that are important in the playbook.
Daryl has a mechanical.
That's a tech worker right there.
I always forget when I'm not in Teams. I don't have echo cancellation.
That's right.
Ticky. I'm gonna hit the mute button while my good friend Mary Beth, who's new to the podcast, introduces herself and tells you all these amazing things.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is live, unedited. All right, Mary Beth,
That's right.
Go ahead and let us know who you are, and let's talk quality and reliability.
Sure. So Daryl mentioned I'm Mary Beth Kirk, of course, and we are on the same CSU core tech strategy team at Microsoft. Been at Microsoft a little over 8 years, and in Teams and phone telephony for a lot longer than that. And I don't want to give away my age, but it was when this was the key component of troubleshooting. It was tip and ring, and honestly, you didn't need a whole lot more than this to be successful, but it sure has changed since then. And so to Brandon, to your question, I think there's two different things. Quality and reliability we talk about often together. From a reliability standpoint, recently Microsoft announced 5 nines, and so we are financially backed 5 nines on Teams Phone. And so from that perspective, you can trust that the network, as vast as it is, will be reliable, and by gosh, it's financially backed at that. And so we run on the same platform that all of our customers do. Daryl and I every single day count on Teams Phone to do our jobs, and we eat our own dog food. And so it is critical for my business purpose that is reliable and of high quality, and just like our customers. And so when they feel pain, we feel pain almost every single time. So 5 nines is one way that we're addressing the reliability component. We could go way down a deep, dark road, and maybe we do that another time around survivable branch appliances and session border controllers and those kind of device things that help us maintain survivability and reliability when there are outages. But I'll segue a little bit into the quality. I've spent a lot of time doing Teams media quality stuff, and when I think about that, there's a lot of tools in your toolbox that people can use. But to go back to something that Daryl said, in this space with Teams, it's very heavily reliant on all of these different teams. And so the phone people may or may not be the people who are taking care of Teams phone today. It could have been lifted and shifted over to the Exchange people and the SharePoint people. They weren't phone people to begin with, so they don't really speak that language. It depends really heavily on the network. And so the network people, that's a whole different group of people that you have to try and coordinate. And so we've built a lot of tools natively into Teams Admin Center, and we have the call quality dashboard, and we can talk more about that. But there's a lot of things that off the truck are ready to go. You don't have to do anything to configure them. You can start to do reactive troubleshooting. We're all doing that firefighting. CEO calls, says I had a bad meeting or call. You better figure out what happened, or it's going to be a bad day for everybody. We can handle that through a couple of different ways. But what I like to talk to customers about is trying to develop some proactive strategies to start to look at before you deploy, before you have that big important meeting, before you send 5,000 devices out into the field. Let's look at proactively some of the media quality stuff so that we can start to make sure that when we do deploy those phones, we all have a good quality experience.
Now, what tools are there? Because you said there's tools included in Teams. Now, I know what they are. I'm just going to ask you just so you can describe them for the audience here. So what tools? Is it a site tool? Is it an individual? Is there a QoS score type of thing? What tools are in the TAC that allow organizations to plan? Because planning is like the big thing right here. It's like doing your research on what each site's going to look like, what bandwidth requirements you have, what network sort of components could get in the way, et cetera. Like that's a big part of getting your team's rollout to roll out smoothly. So what components are in the TAC? Where are they at in the TAC? And what should people look for when they're sort of gauging whether or not they're ready for this?
Yeah, great question. So kind of proactively, as I'm thinking about trying to get in front of any potential issues, you can look in the TAC and you can look at the call quality dashboard. If you look in the left rail, it's probably all the way down at the bottom, and you can look at those media quality things. And there's a lot of really robust call analytics kind of things in there. And there we can see your entire organization across the globe for up to 12 months. I have 12 months worth of data, 6 maybe in some of the European countries, but I can start to really get a look at trending information. Are things better, worse, or about the same since I deployed that site in Louisville? Are they better, worse, or about the same since I started putting more devices on the network? Are they better, worse, or about the same now that we've returned to the office? When everybody went home, that was one thing. I lose a little bit of visibility into all of these home networks, because as I start to bring users back to the office, I can start to see things. So call quality dashboard, CQD, is one of the ways that you can look at things. You can look at real-time analytics or analytics on meetings in the last 24 hours in TAC and the Teams Admin Center. If you go and find the user, if Rick calls and says, man, Brandon's having a terrible call, and if you guys don't figure out what's going on, you're never going to be on the podcast again. I say, holy moly, let me go look. He's on a call right now. Let me go try and troubleshoot what I might be able to find that's going on with this call, and what can I slip under the door to him and say, hey, what can you improve to make your experience better? We can see those analytics in Teams Admin Center today. Go find Brandon as a user, and you'll see the call that he's currently on. You'll see who he's talking to, and you'll see some media quality things like jitter, packet loss, round trip time, all those network kind of things that impact call quality. And so You can see things like if he's on Wi-Fi or wired, is he on mobile? Is he on a laptop? Is he on a desktop? All of those things influence what your media quality is like. So you can start to dig in there, look a little bit. And I always say, just because Brandon reported the call as bad doesn't mean Brandon caused the problem. He may be talking to Sally, and Sally's the one that's standing in the backyard 75 feet away from the WAP, and causing the problem, but it's affecting his experience. So through Teams Admin Center, I can start to look at the details of that meeting, see which user is causing the issue, and try and do some mitigation there. I can whisper, hey, get closer to the wireless access point, plug into the wire, maybe come off of your mobile phone. We'll often see examples like executives who are working remotely and then they're on their mobile hotspot using video, using shared desktop. That's a lot of bandwidth to try and push through a little mobile hotspot. So when they go back to the exec and say, hey, it looks like you were doing this, it would be better if, as a best practice, when you have these important meetings, Mr. Executive or Mrs. Executive, that you are on a good stable Wi-Fi, or maybe not on your mobile phone, or some best practices there.
So slightly on that topic, and if you've noticed, my eyes have been kind of diverted down. Maybe you haven't noticed, but I'm on my mobile phone, and I could have swore there was a way on the mobile Teams app, even as a user, to test my connection for quality to ensure that I'm in a good spot.
Ooh.
So can you speak to that?
There is in the desktop app, but I don't know about the mobile app. That's a great question. So I'll speak to the desktop app really quickly. There is some real-time analytics there from a user perspective. They can share that with, a live and a call. They can get some analytics about what their Wi-Fi signal strength is. And again, jitter, packet loss, round trip time, stuff like that. On a mobile device, I'm not sure. That's a good one.
I'm not saying, I could be me being crazy. I feel like last week I saw it pop up on.
Maybe.
I have about 6 cell phones, so I don't remember which phone I was on.
But your Windows phone? Was it your Windows phone?
It might have been my Windows phone. I thought it was under the call settings, but I'm sitting here in the call settings, and I don't want to belabor the point.
Yeah, I can't remember. The tricky bit, I think, about any of those kind of things is the user has to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't do a lot of good for Sally, the receptionist, to have that information if she doesn't know what to do with it. But being able for a more skilled person to be able to see those real-time analytics in Teams Admin Center as the call is happening can be very helpful.
Yeah.
And then, of course, historically, we have, like I said, up to 12 months worth of data that we can start to break down if we're troubleshooting or doing some proactive work.
Yeah, the interesting thing from my perspective is a lot of times we get the customer complaints, and we not as a service provider, we may not be privy to the Teams Admin Center, right? So we can provide links and tools, and we can kind of direct them. But my mind's kind of going back to this mobile app. In the legacy days, there were ways to, hey, check your LTE connection, your 5G connection, and maybe I'm crazy, but maybe after the show I'll get with you guys and see if I can figure it out. But it might be a good tool sometimes to be able to say, hey, user, understood you had a really bad call. I'm looking in the TAC maybe. Yeah. Can you go ahead and run this test so we can see if we can isolate, is it your Wi-Fi? Is it your 5G connection? Let's try a couple different things and maybe get some feedback from the user on that piece where they're not being affected on calls. Instead, they're working with their IT support to proactively try to mitigate that.
Yeah. I think one thing we have done well is we in product have done a lot of things like forward error correction and things like that to compensate for where there's network issues, but we also will prompt you, hey, it looks like your Wi-Fi connection isn't very good. Do you want to transfer to another device? That handoff, if you took a call, we're all talking on this call, but I look and I see it's time to pick up my kiddo from soccer practice and I head out the door on Wi-Fi, transfer it to my mobile phone. That part's pretty seamless, but then leaving the wireless network at my house and then driving down the road, we do a pretty good handoff now to the LTE network as well. It's pretty seamless. You can almost get away without telling anybody. So we've compensated technically through the product, but then also done some things like guide people where they might be having issues to make a change in the way they're connected.
Yeah, and
I'm going to ask a question real quick. Sorry, Brandon, let me just ask this question really quickly because I know we're talking about how to troubleshoot and things like that, right? But what's interesting to me is that when we went all teams as an organization, and when I say all teams, like as our core product, those problems seem to have subsided. Like Teams has so much, for me, so much more of a richer experience. It's a richer sound. It's higher quality. It's not like if you go right from a cell phone call to a Teams call, the difference. And the Teams call, more often than not, is far better than a PSTN call. Is there a difference in maybe the codecs that Teams uses versus normal PSTN traffic?
It's evolved, right? We used to do silk codec, then satin codec. The codec has really evolved to improve the user experience. And again, things like voice suppression and all these things. Customers used to complain all the time about echo. I have echo. They didn't really have echo. They were sitting two cubicles apart and they could hear each other over the same line. Things like that have improved in the product to help mitigate some of the bad user behavior, but also some of the network stuff that was going on.
Yeah, for me, it just seems like it's just always better. And even on the mobile experience, to be honest, is just fantastic. From a, you can almost use this as your entire phone. Actually, you can use it as your entire phone and do all of your calling on Teams all day long, which is what I typically do during a workday, and I very rarely used my cell phone number. But anyway, sorry, I thought I'd mention that because it's a great
case. Yeah,
it is.
Well,
totally.
and I was going to say, in regards to the quality, the user experience around quality, there's even I say a fairly recent, I don't know how recent because I don't use my mobile as much probably, but I've been noticing on the last few calls where I am on my mobile, I'm not very good about keeping my cell phone battery charged. I've noticed where Teams now, your mid-meeting, mid-call, and Teams now pops up a notification to alert you like, hey, your battery's about to die. Here's your two choices: switch to a different device or plug in. And I think it's those little things that just improve the user experience, and it really boils down to the quality, right? Like it's going to be perceived as quality if all of a sudden I'm not on the call. Like, well, someone's network just dropped when in reality, it's just my battery died, and yeah, it's my fault. But the perception in the business is
totally
what is going on with this person.
Teams keeps dropping people.
Yep.
Well, his battery went dead. Things like that. Yeah, this is the bad user behavior that we're able to do some compensating for.
And what I'd be curious, obviously, and I know this is a little off topic of calling, but I'd be curious, back to the quality dashboards where you're tracking things where you can see, is this person on Wi-Fi? Are they connected to the network? I could imagine, and maybe it's a question, I imagine that battery, now that it's kind of watching that battery, I assume at some point there's going to be that data could be lifted up into TAC for the admin. So when there's complaints of dropped calls, well, we see that the battery was at dead. So that's
Are you talking about AI sort of, monitoring, Brandon?
Not so much AI, just data analytics, like all the data that helps you narrow down and isolate the root cause of an issue.
Well, it's interesting Rick said that. There are some innovations coming soon. And what we didn't talk about was Call Quality Dashboard and Power BI together, the power of those two tools together with what we call the QER, the Quality of Experience Reporting. So there's all that stuff in TAC, and that's great. And I think it depending on who's using it, that may be all they need. But for those who are doing a little bit deeper troubleshooting, we can put CQD and Power BI together to really do some incredible troubleshooting. And so through that, we're going to make some innovations in the near future that may or may not involve some machine learning.
There we go. I love it. That's fantastic. It's probably going to be called Copilot for QCD or CQD.
Yeah, pick your favorite acronym. I think what's really cool about that, and Mary Beth briefly mentioned it, but I'm going to say it again, like just because a customer or an employee or even an executive says the call quality was bad, it doesn't necessarily mean it was bad, right? There might be some brand bias. There might have been some very specific thing taking place at their house at that point in time, right? My kids upstairs sound like elephants. They're stomping right now. You can't hear it because noise suppression is great, but you can hear me typing for some reason. Anyway, this comes up with devices, right? As we're considering like Teams Phone moving from someone like some Avaya or Cisco or ShoreTel or Mitel or Picatel, I don't care, right? I might have a plastic phone here and then a Microsoft Teams phone here from one of our OEM vendors. And oh, well, I picked this up and it sounds like this. I picked this up and it sounds like that. Let's see what the data says, right? Because like there's like perception and biases and physics of how long delay takes from the time a tone happens or someone speaks and I hear it in my headset. And so what Mary Beth was just talking about QER, being able to have like the power of those analytics in a Power BI dashboard, man, there are so many different slicers and so many different, there's a term for it, I can't think of it right now. There's a term for all the different things. I'll think
Dimensions. Yeah.
Say again.
Dimensions.
Dimensions. That's the word.
Yep.
Dimension. That's a fun word. It's like flippy floppy. It's kind of a fun word. There's so many dimensions inside this particular QER thing. So we can get to like what network were you on? What manufacturer of device? What specific device model? What firmware version? What Teams app version was running on that device? Like being able to drill into the details not only provides context for the customer about what they might see, but it gives us the tools and gives customers, their admins, the tools to be like, hey, I've been trying to push this update for a while, but you're telling me I can't because I can't have like any kind of downtime or I can't have a maintenance window. But like this good, this bad, here's the data, right? It's not an opinion at that point in time. And I think many of us in technology are kind of used to letting data rule our life, and there's value to data kind of to help kind of prove a point, but it tells a story. And Mary Beth does this better than anybody. She's like, is it better now or was it better before? Right? I wear glasses. So is it better now? Click. Is it better now? Click. Data can tell us that because then we can figure out how to properly tune our network, properly tune our devices based upon firmware and hardware, and maybe even some device management stuff along the way. So like, it's not because, oh, here's this CQD call analytics stuff, and now we got Teams devices stuff, and now we have this network people, and now we have identity. We are all in the boat, all together, and it's a unique time in what we're doing with voice around the world, and I love it. I think it's good, but it gets customers tripped up, and this is why I really value opportunities like this to address it, say it out loud. Right? There's a lot of moving parts, but the good news is that we have partners like Momentum that thinks about it. You know, we have really incredibly smart people at Microsoft that are thinking about playbooks. We have other customers and partners that are wanting the ecosystem to do well because we all win, right?
And the customer wins, right? When you have groups of people that put solutions together for the customers, it does get to be pretty exciting because the solution that we end up delivering to an organization far exceeds the solution that they had. And it was when they start off skeptical like that, and they get to be in your boat and go, this is amazing. This is really that's super exciting. I think it's the best system since sliced bread, to be honest. Like, Teams were massive, Teams proponents here. But as a former business owner, I look at Teams and I look at it from a not necessarily a technical perspective. I look at it more as a what can I do with Teams that allows me to drive revenue, drive productivity, right? Maybe some cost savings. I look at it and I look at all those things. And then I see all the tools around Teams Phone, whether it's Power Automate or all, Power BI for stats. There's all sorts of cool things that are surrounding the solution. And you go, oh, wow. I mean, Brandon and I this was a year ago, we were dinking around with forms to Power Automate, right? And then routing forms. And we're like, wow, this is so cool. And it may be basic because like every webinar registration now is like on Teams form and it does some stuff and lets people in all sorts of cool things. But a year ago, I was like, man, this is amazing. And how do we go and take advantage of all these tools around the phone system? Anyway, back to devices. Question for you on mobile devices. How often, and I think it's quite often, but how often are organizations, I want to say switching to corporate owned phones, but how often is a Teams phone deployment rolling, and then organizations bring Intune into it and manage their Android devices. Do you see a move towards BYOD or corporate owned devices? I'm curious about that.
It's a great, both for sure. The conversation, I think, also depends on maybe the region and the vertical, right? So like if you get outside of the US, like I live here, right? But if I get outside of the US and especially get inside Western Europe or other areas in Asia, it's a mobile world. So the idea of a plastic phone on a desk is foreign.
Yeah.
Everything having to be here in my hip, at my pocket, man, that's gold. It's everything. It's texting, it's carrier, it's collaboration, it's all my communication stuff. So maybe let's pick a generic customer. Let's just pretend we're a healthcare customer, right? I have to have mobile devices, right? Especially think of a frontline worker like a nurse. That nurse does not sit at a desk. My sister is a nurse. She never, ever gets to sit at a desk, right? She's always helping her patients. So the ability to have a mobile device in the pocket of her scrubs and to know that the customer, or the patient that might pull the chain and need her right away can reach her right away, but also know that a colleague who might need to consult with her can reach her right away. Mobile's where it's at, right?
Yeah.
And so that mobile might be BYOD or it might be corporate owned. And I don't think that I think that's really more of a commercial conversation. I think the management tools have gotten really good where I don't necessarily care if it's a BYOD or if it's a corporate owned device. Customers need to make that decision. But being able to take that context into Intune as a management tool, we can build a profile for what corporate profile looks like or a profile of what personal profile is so we don't cross the streams. But having a mobile device as well, if we're talking about healthcare, what's one of the largest healthcare electronic records tools in the world, right? It's Epic. So being able to have something like, oh, wow, wouldn't it be great if I had a mobile device that had rich Epic integration to be able to have my patient data here? Oh my gosh, that would exists.
Be epic.
Right, that would be epic. It'd be more than flippy floppy. It would be epic. Right? And so, I mean, yes, mobile devices come up a lot. Whether it's carrier-based like Teams Phone Mobile, more likely, though, it's the end usability of the device. How do I allow you the flexibility to bring your iPhone or Android, or maybe I need to issue you something because of some commercial deal I have as a customer, right?
Interesting. I'm curious. I'm going to ask you a question. It's a personal question. Daryl, Mary Beth, and Brandon. Brandon, you mentioned you carry 6 cell phones, or you have 6 cell phones. But Daryl, do you have one cell phone for everything, or do you have multiple cell phones?
Great question. For what I do at Microsoft at home, I have one. It's an iPhone 15 Pro Max. This is my device. I don't separate business from work, except for things like focus time and stuff like that. But in the drawer right here, I've got probably 10 different cell phones that are part of different demo tenants testing different technologies. Some iPhone, some Android, right? So, but for my life, I have one and only one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mary Beth?
For years, I had 2. I had a corporate-owned device and I had a personal device. My husband has a corporate-owned device and a personal device. His personal is an Android. His corporate is an iPhone. I, however, only have an iPhone that serves all purposes, and it is a personal device that I pay for. Microsoft does not provide our cell phone.
Same.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of a single device. Funny, Rick, we were talking about this on like 3 podcasts ago. I'm typically a fan of a single device. I run dual SIM. I would prefer to keep it. Obviously, when you talk about professional work, though, and this need for compliance, whether it's in healthcare or the organization just decides, hey, you can bring your own device, but we're going to force that compliance. In other words, maybe we're going to manage a section of your device. So we're going to virtualize it. We're going to put our applications over here in your work profile. And we promise we don't have access to your private side of your phone. That obviously becomes a concern for employees, right? So some companies may need to come up with, if they're going to mandate certain things, they need to be prepared to answer whatever that requirement is, right? So if I'm going to make you have a corporate managed device, and I, as a citizen of my country, say, you know what? No, I own my device. You can't make me use my device. companies have to take that into consideration, right? So I think there's absolutely a need for that flexibility for a BYOD versus a corporate, here you go, here's your dedicated device.
Yeah. As we get into device management, as we get into the mobility, because Daryl, you said it earlier, there's a lot of countries that are mobile first, right? Like a lot of countries are mobile first. They don't have the PSTN infrastructure that maybe North America had, or different organizations had, or different countries had. I think isn't BT, as an example, getting rid of the core PSTN in Europe? I think in 27, something like that. I think there was a push to do that. I thought it was happening. Yeah, the big turndown, right? And I think and I think there's gonna, ultimately, I think that'll happen. That'll happen here. But what's interesting though is the whole BYOD versus corporate owned, and the reason that's interesting is because if you're a Teams Phone Mobile sort of, if you take down Teams Phone Mobile, you're looking at the mobile network. You're looking at the mobile network being the number for everything, versus BYOD. It could still be that way, but it's not being managed. I didn't think it was being managed still by, like, here's the corporate organization that wants to own the whole thing. Here's my device, right? So I wonder if there's going to be this, kind of separation at some point, or is it always going to be halvesies, right? This BYOD versus corporate owned devices. I think there's a big market out there that says corporate owned devices are a small portion today, but I think they're driving more towards, as security and compliance become really important, they're driving more towards issuing those devices. Brandon, you said it earlier too, from a privacy perspective, some individuals are more concerned about sharing my personal sort of browsing data with an organization. Funnily enough, though, I was traveling this week. I don't know where I was going. Nashville? No, where was I at? Dallas. I was in Dallas, and I was talking to the flight attendant. Delta issues corporate devices. She was carrying 2 phones. Delta issues corporate devices, and there's no phone on them. It's just an Android device, and it has their manuals for everything. Everything is loaded on there. And so my mind goes to, well, how do we stick Microsoft Teams on there? Like, you've already got the devices. Let's just stick Microsoft Teams on there and give everybody a phone number. Let's go. She said it doesn't do calling. And they actually disabled the cell phone calling on that device. They literally treat it as a Wi-Fi device or a networking device just to have the information at their fingertips. So I think that's pretty interesting. I have no point to be made there except to talk about all the different things I was thinking about in my head. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's adjacent. I'm going to add one thing to it because it's just kind of a little fun fact. About 2 or 3 years ago here at Microsoft, I was supporting one of our account team members, phone expert, working with a customer that needed to put a device in the truck. So whatever this customer did, they had trucks, and the trucks had devices, and the devices did things for the workers that were in the truck. They had to have this really unique system that when the truck got over a certain mile per hour, certain things disabled on the device. So it was a really interesting kind of conglomeration of teams for things like collaboration and communication, and make sure that dispatch could talk to the frontline worker, but yet they couldn't pick up the PSTN, but yet they still had to have emergency calling. It was like there's this big laundry list of things that were required for this mobile device sitting in a frontline worker in this truck for purposes. I like that idea a lot. I can't remember exactly where we landed with all those different things. I think some of them we had, some we're still building, but it was like a really awesome customer use case of things that I wouldn't think of, right? For me, phone was plumbing. I've said it for years. I am a plumber. I build PSTN stuff and I get dial tone, and it's awesome and I'm good at it. But for this customer to be like, oh, I have to have this and this, but not that, this, but not that. Wow, it's a salad bar. That's really cool use case, right? And that's the fun kind of stuff that Mary Beth and I get to do, is work with customers, because every customer is unique, and that one feature is used 50 different ways, some of which we support.
That's really cool. That is really cool, though. If you think about that from a delivery driver, that sort of use case, that's pretty cool to be able to disable things, enable things, right? So that you're not dealing with someone who's driving and texting and create some sort of a lawsuit because they were driving and texting, or my delivery driver driving and texting, hit a car, and now all of a sudden I've got some sort of a lawsuit on my hands as the organization, right? Because my corporate driver did this wrong, right? Or wasn't doing the right thing. That's pretty cool. Those sorts of things are just so far beyond your typical phone system, right? And that's what the things that you guys get to work on. That's what makes this whole platform, and it is a platform. It's not even a phone system. It's a platform. That's what makes this platform so unique. That's what makes the partner ecosystem unique in this space, because you get to go create. You get to go address problems. Brandon and I talk about this all day long. You no longer have to sell phone systems as an example, right? Well, all we do all day long, Brandon, what do we do all day long? We literally solve problems all day long. Here's how we overcome this problem. Here's how we overcome that problem. And it's problems that you wouldn't get in a normal phone system, right? But it's like, okay, these are business problems that people want to address, and how they address certain business practices. And it's pretty exciting, pretty sort of fun time. We talked about this a while back, how we're enjoying the space that we're in at this point in time in life, because you look at this and go, we're so different. 4 years ago, this was all very different. And now the pace of acceleration is pretty exciting, as is the adoption, right? With 20 million PSTN subscribers. Do any of you have a guess as to where we're going to end from a 2024 from a numbers perspective, PSTN users?
I don't. I hesitate to say that, because I think it depends on what numbers you look at, because there's many ways to slice and dice that number. I know it's growing, and it's going up and to the right, and that's really valuable for us, right? For sure. Yeah, and I think it speaks to, I know you're not trying to tie a bow on this or anything, but I think that's why getting devices deployed and managed well ensures that when I pick it up, it's reliable and people are ready to use it. And then to Mary Beth's point, I've heard her talk about this before. I don't know if you have an elevator pitch for it, but people ask us what is a good call, right? Because it's the good call might be brilliant, or it might be so the device might be good, but how do I know the call's good? So I think being able to have devices that are good, and then have experts like Mary Beth that probably have a way that they can define that, but also work with you to do that, is just as valuable.
Interesting. What is
that, Mary Beth?
What is the good call? Yeah.
What is a good call?
Well, it's a little subjective, right? And I think the user tolerance on mobile phones was much higher for a long time. I'm on my mobile phone and it broke up or it dropped. It's expected. That's not really the case anymore, to Rick's point, because it's all become the same device. I count on that device for business and pleasure, right? So it's very important. If you look at the tool set from a Microsoft perspective, we'll give you a baseline. We'll tell you that 3%, we won't, more than 3% of poor calls is above the average that we would recommend. But for some customers, they may have a site that they know is in Singapore or somewhere else, and that's just not achievable. So that number should be a little higher. For others who have a really tight network, lots of bandwidth and tight control, we want it to be less than 3%. We want it to be more like 1.5 maybe. So when you look at the tools, there's always a threshold. You'll see what our recommendation is. In QER that we talked about with Power BI, we've got it color-coded red, yellow, greens. So red is bad, green is good. You'll see that. But it is a little bit subjective within the organization about where they want to set their goals and what they have available.
On that note, Mary Beth, I'm just going to tell you right now, I sit in the Denver Tech Center. You would think I have phenomenal internet service. No. So what's interesting is I have an employee who sits just on the north side of Manila in the Philippines. He has better call quality a lot of times than I do. My connection, it is crazy that I can live in Denver. And our perception typically is these other countries have inferior data networks. And it's simply not true anymore, I don't think.
Yep.
And my whole point being is he's interacting with us here in the States all day long on Teams. He's interacting with our customers all day long on Teams. Could be Teams phone, could be Teams meetings. And the quality is spot on for him. I mean, things do happen, but for the most part, it blows I joke with him all the time. I'm like, you have next generation quality compared to me. And I sit in Denver, Colorado, the tech center.
In the tech center.
Yeah, in the tech center.
You know, Brandon, I feel like you find a spot to inject that nearly every show. You know,
I do. It's
like I would hate to be his ISP, right? It's like, oh, who's his ISP?
Well, if you knew where I live, my ISP literally is right across the street. So you can take guesses on who that might be.
Level 3 Broomfield. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, all right. What's like? We got time for one more question. I think we've got. So actually, we don't, but we're going to ask it anyway. Does anybody have an image that we can post up of what the QCD looks like? The quality control, quality CQD looks like that's got some populated information. I think that would be really cool if we could share a demo image of what that looked like in the chat so people could see it. I think that'd be fun to have. So at some point, if you guys have something like that, it'd be fun to pop that into the show chat. Brandon, any final words as we hit this top of the hour? It kind of flew by.
I do have final words that's probably totally unrelated to our conversation with Daryl and Mary Beth, which I appreciate you guys coming to visit. Always fun to talk with you guys. This is more for our listeners, something that has recently popped up in the Teams Admin Center. Many people have been asking for the Q's app. It's been a buzz, lots of buzz. There is now SLA settings in the Teams Admin Center, probably specifically for the Q's app, which means I think we're getting really close to getting our hands on the Q's app.
Miguel did an amazing demo of it last week, right? We saw the demo of it last week. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, it was great. So we're excited. We've been waiting for it for a long time. I think what was it? Is it October or something like that? That the it's supposed to roll somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think the public roadmap still says October. I think that's still the plan.
Yeah.
But when you start to see the features hit TAC, it's usually a hint or a clue anyway. And now we have seen it where the features do disappear. But anyway, just wanted to state that for our listeners that, Q's has been a big buzz for our customers and our potential customers. And we're finally starting to see like, hey, Microsoft's starting to prep for it. So excited for that.
That is good stuff. Well, I want to say thank you very much, Daryl, Mary Beth. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us and talk about just a range of things, right? Devices and, the call quality dashboards, all. I think that's really cool. It's a thing that is, I will say this from a product perspective, I skip over, I haven't really focused a ton on highlighting that information to our sales teams and stuff like that so that they can share that with customers. So I think that's something that's really cool to kind of bring into our discussion pre-sales so people can feel good about what this looks like particularly when they're transitioning from premise-based platforms to Microsoft Teams, right? So that's pretty darn exciting. Well, we love Teams Phone, and we say thank you very much to Daryl and Mary Beth for joining us for episode 70 of Everything Teams Phone Live. Now, Brandon, let's send it out, buddy.
It's a wrap. This is the last Friday of August, so we will see you in September for episode 71. Thanks, Daryl. Thanks, Mary Beth.
Bye,
everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Brandon.